Hello, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our fall garden planning webinar. Today we have Nikki and Dave Schauder from Permaculture Gardens here to tell you how you can still get the maximum harvest out of your garden, even if it's almost the fall. Go
Absolutely.
ahead and
Oh my gosh, I was so excited to be here. Thank you, Alyssa, for introducing us. My name is Nikki.
And I'm David. We're in
And
two separate places.
Yes, and if any kids come on into my door here, we will be interrupted, but it's just real life. All the kids are home right now. We hope you're doing well. Who here? I hope you guys can type in the chat. I'm gonna look at the chat here. And let us know where you all are coming from, what zip codes are on. I know that most of the registrants, at least that I've seen register for this, have been located in the Northeast, which is great. But some of you are in California, some of you are in the West Coast, some of you are in the Midwest. So tell us if you are here, where are you growing? Nebraska. Yay, Nebraska, Dave. Oh, wonderful. Okay. And it gives us, we usually do this on Zoom and we like seeing faces, but the chat, hopefully will be keep the chat hopping, okay? So that we can serve you better. That's how. Southwest Arkansas, Maryland, Portland, Oregon. Whoa, we have you guys from everywhere. Montana. Wonderful. Ontario, Canada, and Oregon. Great. So you guys, these places are actually more, I don't know, you're all over, but I would say that you have this big window right now of opportunity to start planting your vegetable garden. So let's begin. Before I begin, I just want to thank Mother Earth News for hosting this event. If you are not a member yet of Mother Earth News, we are offering this for free as a training for you all, but there are so many rich resources. I rely on these resources myself. If you would like to learn more about anything at all, chickens and bees and homesteading, please use the link below, bit.ly men-live and join in for more than just this, what we're talking about tonight. And then if you don't have it handy yet, we have a production planner, which you can link to here. Hopefully you would have had it in the notes before coming in, or if you were joining us from our own newsletter, we sent it to you this morning. But definitely have it handy, even as a screen form if you don't have it printed out, because it's 32 pages. But it'll help you know what stage we're in this garden process. So I usually will do a quick intro about me and Dave. Dave is my husband, and he's a really good gardener. And I'm Nikki, and I'm the homesteader, but we are microgreens farmers. We've been teaching gardening, permaculture gardening now since 2015, I guess. And our journey started from food allergies that our first two kids had. So severe that we started to question the food production system and started growing our own food. So little by little, we grew tomatoes, basil, and we failed. And honestly, we continue to fail until now. So do not get disheartened. And yet, a lot of what we do continues to grow. And if we don't grow it, we can see the effects around the U.S. with the gardeners that we mentor. So like a watermelon is not growing in our yard, but it is in Oklahoma, and we can see it, like what its fullness would have been. So don't lose hope. Okay. I hope also, thank you for sharing where you're from. I also want to know what your best crop was or is so far, right? What's your best crop so far? Dave, what do you think our best crop is so far?
I think the perennials are doing well. So we got a crop of figs that are coming in. And we have a lot of strawberries.
Yes. So this is hard, especially if you've had a bad summer, as we did. Last year, we canned 13 weeks of tomatoes. This year, wiped out by the groundhog and the deer. So we are looking for those wins. We're struggling to see those wins. And we've grown enough to feed like 25% of our fruits and vegetables, even in a tiny townhouse. And last year we were like, this is really making a dent because we moved to a bigger place, a 3-acre farm. This is really making a dent in our grocery bill. And we didn't feel the increase in grocery prices. But this year we feel it. We feel it bad. So we are looking for those wins to keep us growing, because it's not over yet. July is here and August is here. We're about to start transplanting a lot of fall crops. So 3 things are going to happen today. We're going to clarify what we're trying to do this fall in terms of creating a permaculture garden abundance in your backyard. We're going to walk you through a production plan, and then we're going to take your Q&As. And these are things that you may need to know after, but not covered by this particular webinar, and further resources that you need to research on your own. But the goal for this webinar is mostly walking you through a production plan. That's the workbook that we sent to you. So what is the goal for the fall? We're keeping the harvest going. We're starting the plants that will grow well through the winter, and sometimes even through the spring. And we're continuing to care for the ecology to support another year of good harvest next year. Now, we notice our losses did not come from bad soil. Sometimes that's the first step, and if you had like a hierarchy of like what you have to get right first. And one of those first steps are like getting the soil right first in your backyard. So we know we have that right in our beds, but it's not that. It's the wildlife and the deer and fencing that needs to go up for us. So maybe you're an onslaught of both, like the soil is bad, there is no water, and you have critters coming. And that's hard. So we have to pick, like, first baby step, soil. Steph says your best crop is tomatoes. Wow. I hope you've been canning them. Tomatoes, grapes, zucchini. Wonderful. Squash, tomatoes, and green beans. Oh, so yummy. I can see minestrone in your future, and ratatouille, and a lot of good pasta and like Italian dishes, stir fries. Tracking planting activities. Okay, what is a production plan? That's the first thing that we're going to talk about. So Dave, do you want to go and do this slide? So I'm not just...
Sure. So production plan is kind of like taking that initiative to be more intentional about how you're planning what you're putting in your garden. So a lot of us, we start out and we have some things that we want to grow, and then we just kind of plant them and we see how it goes. But what happens is, as you become more intentional about it, then you can figure out when the best time is to start the seeds, to avoid things like the environmental conditions like the weather or certain pest windows that occur. And then as you get more involved, you can start to do more advanced kinds of plantings where you have multiple seasons of growing. So in one year, you don't just have a summer garden. You can grow when it's a little cooler in the spring, and in the fall, there's lots of crops that do better in that cooler weather. And we're going to be talking about that with the fall garden. There's a lot of, you might have less pest pressure in the fall, especially if you're in the south. So you start thinking about like, okay, now I'm going to be rotating crops in and out of my garden for the different seasons, as well as thinking about if I have different perennials, like I might have strawberries that come in our climate in June, but I want to have coverage throughout the year so that I get harvest from my perennial vegetable and fruit crops throughout the year. So basically, a production plan just kind of takes into account all of that so that you start to organize your thoughts a little bit. You can take observations about what happened, versus whatever your plans were, and then use that for following years to get a more bountiful harvest.
Yeah. So observation and improvement, like Dave said, is going to help us remember not to do the same thing, not to plant the same variety, not to plant it in the wrong spot. And that is one of the basis of any permaculture design. I'm not talking about what permaculture is so much in this webinar, but the approach that we take in this planning your garden is different than most organic gardeners or farmers even, because it's really heavy on looking at how nature deals with this and trying to go with that rhythm and go with that with nature's patterns. So one first way to do this as we walk through is to recognize where you've already answered this question, what your climate is like, and what varieties are suitable for your climate. Sometimes we try to use the same varieties that are available to us, but they don't really fit the climate that we're in. So it's good to test a few different varieties each year to see which one holds up as the thing that works the best for where you live as you choose your plants. Often we don't think about growing in the fall. We think just about growing in the summer. And in the spring, we're gearing up for the summer and the summer harvest of peppers and tomatoes and squashes, which are wonderful and which we're really missing right now. We have a few melons, um, but then we are not giving up because we still know that there's going to be a harvest that can come in the fall in the form of our cool weather crops. If anyone, I think a lot of you are already familiar with the differences between your cool weather and your warm weather crops. And if you're not, check that production planner out for the dates and the cool weather versus warm weather crops. We're now looking to plant again those things that we planted in the springtime that may come back. So, oops. How can I go back? There we go. So figuring out your fall garden planting, and this is just here to kind of spark some thoughts about, oh yeah, I want to plant this one. Oh yeah, this one. I've never thought about planting this, and what is mosh anyway? So all these things are here to give you prompts, and at a few minutes after, we're going to give a little workshop portion where we'll give you 2 minutes to write down your own crops for this coming season. Dave?
So I can explain a little bit about what the difference between. So you have cool weather crops. Everything on this slide is a cool weather crop. So it generally does better if the temperatures don't get higher than 80, 85 degrees Fahrenheit. But the reason why we're breaking it up into both fast growing and slow growing is because some of these slow growing fall crops need a little bit of planning, because they take quite a lot of time. They might take like 3 months, 4 months to fully develop. And the problem is, as you get into the colder months, you start getting less light, the temperatures start going down, and the actual growth rate of the plant goes down as well. So you get this kind of curve where you started the plant and it starts looking good, and then it gets to be like Thanksgiving and you don't have any harvest. You just have a plant that's like halfway done in its development. So we wanted to break that up, is that for the slow growing cool weather crops, you need to think a bit more, plan ahead and start them a bit earlier. But that doesn't mean that you can't grow anything in the fall. There's plenty of fast growing fall crops where you can even, because they grow so fast, you can even do succession planting where you grow multiple rounds of these crops.
Yes, so for instance, radishes, if you started them now, you might have 2 or 3 rounds of radishes depending on where you live. And I'll take the example from Dave of the biennial called a parsnip slow growing crop. So a parsnip takes about 120 days sometimes to grow. And as you think of that, you can find a list again in your production planner of the different crops under cool weather, the minimum and maximum temperatures. These are germination temperatures. So we usually use these as our guides. So if the weather outside for you is consistently above 40 degrees but under 90, you can start broccoli. if the weather is consistently you can transplant broccoli. You can start them now, and then as the weather cools, and these, I know right now we're in Kansas, in Mother Earth News is in Kansas, and they're experiencing weather in the hundreds, and we are here in Northeast, and it's in the 95s, right? So we can't quite transplant our broccoli and Brussels sprouts, although we have them waiting in the wings, and perhaps you can, purchase seedlings if you wanted to. We have them waiting in the wings to start. But these are here to guide you. They're not, per variety. These are just estimates of the whole region of the whole species of broccoli. But varieties will also tend to have different temperatures. I keep on doing this. And then days to harvest is also helpful. Kohlrabi 130, Mosh 250. Is that right? Was I the one who wrote this? I think this is 25, not 250 days to harvest. That's 25 days to harvest. Because mosh is, I don't know if you're familiar with mosh, but it's like a little chubby microgreen. But it's a salad outside in your garden. So that is not 250. That's 25. So just checking on that. That is a typo. But 100 Brussels sprouts, broccoli, and the parsnip isn't here, but that's 120. So just keep those in mind as you work back from your as we will see later, your first frost date. Ideal germination temperature. So here are some things to keep in mind from that list. The temperature at which the plant seed is most likely to germinate quickly within 2 weeks. So you can, even if it is, goes back, you can start them now indoors, but if it's too hot outside, don't start these seeds outdoors. Okay. You can do things like carrots. You can start them outside and just wait for them to pop up, and maybe shade them a lot with mulch. But it's important to respect that this is the germination temperature for starting your seeds. Days to harvest means how long it would take from the plant to produce its first harvest from transplant, not from seed starting. So if you see days to harvest here in this column, it means from the time that you transplanted your cabbage, it will take 70 days before you harvest it.
So just a quick note is when you're looking at the back of a seed packet, that if they do have days to maturity or days to harvest, that's always from the transplant, not from when you plant the seed. Mm-hmm. So depending on how quickly that seed takes to germinate and develop into a seedling, that might be a couple more weeks that you have to add to the amount of time from when you start the seed until you're able to harvest the plant.
Right. So, and then temperature extremes. So then we look at the minimum and maximum temperatures that the plant can comfortably survive in. And from these three intersections, we get this overlay, or this graph here, this box of green, which is your planting window. Now you could look on Google and look at your monthly average record temperature, Google your zip code, and you will see a tab for graph. And when you look at that graph, you can look at how your averages are likely to go. Of course, every year is different, but it'll give you a little bit of a window into when you can grow a specific crop. So here are the steps. If you have a pen and paper, and I hope you do, it really is a workshop. Find out or Google, what is your first frost date? What is your first frost date?
Some people might not even have a frost date, but
if
you do have a frost date.
California, right? Arizona, do you have a frost date? No frost date. You have a different season. Arizona, you're growing tomatoes like in February, right? Then you have to be guided by those temperature ranges to see what you can grow and what historically you have grown. So those of you who have frost dates, do you still have, and you want to grow these like a parsnip, or what was it that was long? I forgot already. 100 days left before your first frost. If you do, you can grow pretty much everything except kohlrabi. So if your first frost is October 30, you have 108 days. Oh, this is from a previous webinar. So I'm not sure if I actually have 108 days before first frost.
Well, you can just count back. It's August. That's
okay. You do the
July.
counting, Dave.
So yeah, it's 68 days.
Oh, 68 days before first frost. Uh-oh. That means the window is closing
Oh,
really
sorry,
fast.
October 30th. October.
Yeah,
Yeah.
October 30th.
Sorry, no, that's different. So
Okay, somebody.
yeah,
So
89 days or 90
okay,
days roughly. Yeah.
90 days. Okay. Do you guys know how many days you have left before your first frost? Yes, yes. This is why we like to hear what you all have to say. So you can X out the plants that don't make sense anymore on that list for you. So go back to your production planner, look at all the list of plants and their number of days to harvest. And according to how many days you have left, you can X out several of them already. And if, for instance, you want to grow things like biennials, such as, and I'm not talking about this here because it makes the webinar really long. But if you have questions about that, we can talk about it in the end. Like garlic or potatoes, then we overwinter them. Um, Potatoes is 80 days. So that means you're harvesting them later on in the spring after the winter.
Well, are we mentioning biennials or is that,
Do you want to talk about them, or do you guys want to hear about or let's continue. Does this make sense? Do I still have everyone with me?
I
You
think so. The reason why we count back from the frost date, this is kind of like for more the northern climates. And the idea is that even though it's hot now, it starts getting cold pretty quickly in the fall. So if the temperatures really start dropping by like September, October, some of these longer, slow-growing cool crops, like the parsnip or the cabbage or the broccoli, don't have long enough to kind of establish themselves before the frost comes. And there are some
Yes.
things that you can do to kind of protect and extend your crops, but generally those slow growing crops, if we have a short season, we really need to be starting to think about them earlier in the summer in order to get them ready for the
Mhm.
fall.
So Montana, Colorado, we're thinking about you guys up in the north, Canada. And those of you who have extended seasons where you can grow several of this without any problem. So choose one plant that is semi-hardy and fast for those of you in the north. Example, lettuce, 45 days to harvest. Count the days to harvest from your first frost date. So if you're in Pennsylvania, for instance, and your first frost date is October 35, then you want to count minus 45 days and you get September 15th. But this is not yet the transplant date, remember? Because we still have to account for germination time. So for instance, you have a sowing time where if you are starting from seed, you give about 1 to 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the seed for sowing or seed starting. And then you have a days to harvest, 45 days, which is from transplanting to harvest. And then you have your harvest date. And those are just the nitty gritties of like when to expect what. And you can do, this is the analog way of planting, doing a planting calendar for yourself. So for instance, the sample plants, if your first frost date was October 30, assuming 7 days for germination in the summer, because the summer has good temperatures for germinating a lettuce plant. So 7 days, if we do go back again and we do 45 days to harvest, October 30 minus 45 days is September 15. September 15 minus 7 days is September 8th. That's the last day you can sow lettuce without risk of frost. And after that, let's say you decide to sow lettuce, because you can sow lettuce and harvest it 52 days out of the year, even in Canada. And for those of you who are in Canada and higher elevations, look up Nikki Jabor's book on year-round gardener if you haven't yet, because she has that down to pat. But this is how you do it. You would put it on a cold frame. That's the stuff that you may need to check out a little, do more research on after. You need to put it under hoops or low tunnels to protect it from the elements. But you can do that, and if this is your frost date, this is your starting your seed date. So I hope that was helpful. Is that a little bit more clear? Does that give clarity to how we are calculating these dates? Now, for fast growing plants, if you use, so we have an app that actually does this for you. So you plug in the plant, plug in your zip code first, plug in your different plants, and it spits out your seed, because Dave is in his job. He's actually a software engineer. And he made this app, and it will spit out your seed starting date, transplant date, and harvest date automatically. And if you have slow growing plants, you may still need to use a manual method to double check those dates. If it's a slow growing biennial, like as Brussels, cilantro, parsley, parsnip, because as Dave mentioned, Dave, did you want to expound? Like your slow growing crops still
Yeah.
is.
So yeah, also there's two other factors. Like as the light decreases, I mentioned this before, the growth rate of the plant is going to slow down. So that's one thing. That's the temperature and the amount of light that's available to the plant. It will start to slow down. Plus, there's certain crops that are biennials. So we didn't mention this, but you have annual crops. An annual crop is something that completes its entire growth cycle in a single year. Now, biennial, what happens is the first year, there's a lot of growth. And then the second year, the plant goes to flower. So that first year, it's putting all of its energy into its root system. And then the second year, it tends to flower. So a lot of crops that we think are annuals, things like carrots, garlic, are actually biennials. So what you can do is you can grow them in the fall, and once they establish themselves, they get really good at surviving cold temperatures. So they'll continue to grow during the winter. It's very slow, but because there's such an extended amount of time during the winter, that slow growth, you can still get a large amount of crops in the spring. And you want to make sure with a biennial that you're harvesting those biennials in the spring before the plant kind of wakes up and realizes that it's in its second year and that it wants to now flower. Because once a lot of these plants flower, like the garlic, then it'll change the way it's growing. It'll become more woody, and then it's not really edible. So there's a lot of cases, for example, with carrots, where you can grow them you plant them in the fall early enough that they can establish themselves and start to develop and grow bigger. So you want to make sure that it's early enough before the temperatures start dropping. And then you can harvest it around Christmas time, or even in January or February, and that your carrots will be big and sweet, and it's a real great break. You're not expecting to get anything fresh from the garden at that time, but you can still get fresh vegetables from your garden.
Yes, and for those of you who are in it, if you're Arizona, California, this may not, the slow growing doesn't matter, because you have that time to keep that perennialized. Like parsley and cilantro, you could be doing waves of them, or parsley could perennialize where you are. Maximize your space. So another thing to keep in mind as we're garden planning is, do you have enough space for the things that you want to grow? Not all of the plants you start will germinate. Also keep that in mind, that there is a attrition rate, and not all of the plants you start will germinate or survive in your garden. So you do want to start more seeds than you have space initially, and then maybe give it as a gift, or just weed it out, or find another place for it as you grow. So in your workbook, you have, if you are growing in a small space like a patio or a deck, or you're growing even in your garden, you have a little grid here where you can put the name of your plant, and you can space it efficiently even in a place as small as a patio. Because we used to grow in a townhouse. Our deck was chock-a-block full of stuff, and we grew even trees on that deck, banana trees and fig trees. In Sage, it automatically calculates the available space left after you choose your plants, as you choose your plants. And you can choose the number of plants. So that is something that's taken away. And then you want to think, what does it look like transitioning from now where you have your tomatoes growing in the garden and you're putting in these crops here. I'm not going into all the details of this, but there are notes, or I think in this next slide, if not in your workbook, about the different functions that we're looking for in a garden, in a garden crop, in a crop that you're growing. So for instance, one easy rule to remember is John Jevons, who's a fantastic farmer researcher in California. He has this notion of a heavy feeder, a light feeder, and a heavy giver. Does anybody know about this? Type yes in the chat if you're already familiar with this. We talk about this every time we do a garden planning session. Heavy feeder, light feeder, heavy giver. Can you, and if you haven't yet heard about this, the concept is a heavy feeder is any crop that's usually in the summer, takes a lot of nutrients from your soil to grow. And tomato is one of them. All the solanaceas are heavy feeders. Light feeders are often root crops like carrots or parsnip or lettuce. Heavy feeders can also be leafy greens, even though lettuce is not a heavy feeder. Brassica family like this, cauliflower and cabbage, Brussels sprouts, these are heavy feeders. Spinach is a light feeder. Onions are light feeders. Root crops, most of the root crops, not potatoes, they are light feeders. So I know this is like more things for you guys to look up, but light feeders, heavy givers. And you can ask us more about this if this is something you want to learn about.
I just want to add like a quick note about when to, if you are planting fall crops and you have summer crops and you're like, when do I take the summer crops out to put my fall crops in? So this could be a real tough choice for a lot of people because they've got a great tomato harvest. And this is where kind of like the observation helps, because if you've grown tomatoes the previous year and you've kind of tracked that drop off in the harvest that you get from the tomatoes, then you'll know exactly when you're not. It seems like the tomato is being productive, but it's not. But this is where it's kind of important to start your fall crops separately. You're not starting them in the same place, in the same bed. You're growing them in trays or pots separately from the in-ground where they're going to eventually live. And then what I kind of recommend is there's a point where you just have to be a little bit brutal and you say, look, the amount of harvest I'm going to get from the fall garden crops is going to be way more than the kind of drips and drabs that I'm getting left over. You know, like there might not be enough. You're getting a lot of green tomatoes, but they're not ripening. So that's another tip, is that a lot of these things you can ripen indoors. So you can harvest all your tomatoes, clean it up, put in your fall crops when they're ready to transplant and the weather's a bit cooler. And then ripen all your green peppers and green tomatoes off the vine.
So remember that a month from now, when the tomatoes start no longer turning red on your vine, and you feel like you still want to keep them there, it's going to be heartbreaking, but you'll have to pull them out so that you can make room for a better fall harvest. This is a crop rotation worksheet that shows not just whether it's a heavy feeder, a light feeder, or a heavy giver. Heavy givers are always peas, legumes, nitrogen fixers, if you've heard that term, legume crops, beans or peas, and other functions that in permaculture we observe or we take note of. And if this feels daunting, or like this example here on the screen feels like, how am I going to figure this all out? What's an accumulator? What's a nitrogen fixer? Peanuts, nitrogen fixer, peas, beans. What's a pollinator insectary? You can sort of use this first as a template and then make your own observations as to what seems like. So a stinging nettle, to talk about this in permaculture, the term dynamic accumulator is a word that we use for anything that mines the soil, and these are usually weeds, um, mines the soil for nutrients and brings them into their leaves, and then you cut the leaves, and as they die, the leaves fall to the soil and they fertilize the soil. They're living fertilizers. Dandelion is one of these. Borage is another. These are called chamomile is another. Um, great plants. Some are wildflowers, some are weeds, and uh, I go into great detail on all of the things that we're talking about, Dave and I, in a book that is coming out and Mother Earth News is publishing, called Permaculture Gardening for Everyone. So it's in the editing phase right now, and I've submitted everything, and we're just waiting for layout and all that stuff. But if you ever felt like you needed a reference, that would be it. I think because we go into great detail, and we have future webinars on our own, and that where we explain this as well. Now, fall is a good time for perennials. So start thinking now. Permaculture is also a lot about perennials. You cannot have a permaculture garden without a compost bin, and B, something perennial, because you're trying to put in the least amount of effort for the most amount of gain. You're trying to be a lazy gardener. That's another word for permaculture gardening. That's what happens when you're doing things. Yesterday we were rollerblading, and I saw this mom who was just so effortlessly gliding, like little bits, like not even like she was gliding through the skating rink.
Which
And
is
I was
not
looking,
us. We were
which was
falling
not
all
us.
over the place.
We were falling all over the place and looking really ridiculous. And I was like, but she had hardly any effort. I was like, that is a metaphor for life, for permaculture. This is how we should be attacking our lives and our processes and our everything, business, operations, homeschooling, gardening. So you want to do the least amount of effort for the most amount of gain. And that is what perennials give you. They're doing the work for you. In the end, the ecosystem, the plants themselves will do the work for you. The soil is going to do the work for you. But you need to set up the situation in your garden so that you have the perennial that you like to eat and that grows well in your climate. So this is an example in your workbook of how you would like to set up, how you may want to set up your gardens so that you're covered all year round. And this looks different in every zip code. I would love to go in and Dave, does Sage work for like the Arizona zip codes too?
You mean for the fall garden? Yeah,
Yeah, it would, right?
yeah, it should work. Yeah.
Because we
The
have
problem is
Arizona
that things are
clients.
so hot that you'd have to wait till January or whatever until.
Yes. So that's what I'm thinking of when you guys are, Arizona right now, this is your rest time. This is your winter. Where the rest of us have winter and we don't grow anything, your winter is the summer. And then you wait for the winter to actually grow your like summer crops that are nice when it's just pleasant, right? Right? Am I right? So we're here, we've done
There's just one other very quick thing wanted to add about perennials. So if you're buying uh, perennial plants online there's nurseries now where you can buy this stuff online. Um, some of the things it's hard to source in the fall. So typically things like your apples and your stone fruit, your peaches, you're not going to be able to really locate peach trees and that kind of thing in the fall. But especially for things like perennial vegetables, so these would be things like sunchokes, or um, you could grow asparagus or established rhubarb. Then the fall is still a great time. You have enough time to kind of establish their root systems, and you can still get those things. And also, it's really good for berries. So
Mhm.
if you wanted to put, you know, blackberries or raspberry canes, then the fall is also a pretty good time because the weather is usually a little wetter, a little cooler, and that helps these berries establish their root systems before the winter time.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, so we talked about fall annuals and perennials to grow, how to calculate your planting dates, how to calculate your available space. Where can we get these charts? So Sherry, in the link on Mother Earth News where you had joined this call, that page has the links below to the charts, to the workbook that we're talking about. So you have everything you need. We talked about crop diversity a little bit. We didn't talk about crop diversity. Crop diversity in the sense of what to follow next in your garden. What should you be transplanting? So you don't want to follow a heavy feeder like a tomato with a heavy feeder like a brassica. And if you're wondering what brassicas are, those are your cauliflower, radish, mustards, cabbage, kale, and so on. There's a few more, but those are kind of the leafy green heavyweights of the fall and spring. So you don't want to follow a bed that's small that had a big tomato harvest in it and much less, not much else, with brassicas, with those sort of, plants. You want to follow it with lettuces or something, carrots that are lighter feeders, or peas. Yes, Dave.
And the diversity part is really talking about more like when you're planning out your fall garden, don't just put brassicas all over the garden.
Yeah.
Because what will happen is the smell of the brassicas will allure it'll reach out to all the pests within like a 5-mile radius, and they'll all descend on your fall garden. And then you'll have cabbage loopers and harlequin bugs and all kinds of things. So if you mix and match, this is where with our garden, even though we've had a lot of problems with groundhogs and deer this year, because we've grown so many different things, there's still things that those critters don't like to eat. So, for example, peppers, almost nothing wants to eat peppers. So we're getting like a bumper pepper crop. So if you have that, you're trying to mix those plant families. So if you look at the plant family of the plant you're planting, you want to be trying to put at least like 3 or 4 at least different plant families in the same space.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, you might have carrots, which is in an umbellifer, and that is a good diverse option to put next to your brassica, because the same things that eat the brassica are probably not going to eat the umbellifer as well, unless their name is groundhog. Then they eat everything. But
that reminds me, I need to have an anything but a brassica garden plan because of the devastation from our harlequin bugs. Does anybody else have that problem? You'd think we know this already after so many years of teaching it, but we're just like, it's really convenient to dump all our brassica microgreens into one place and then there, hence the harlequin bug descent. But now we go to the fun part. Okay, you guys ready? I'm going to put a 2-minute timer. Figure out what to grow. In your workbook, you have this. And I'm glad you asked about that, where that workbook is. If you don't, grab a paper, review this webinar again when the replay comes out, and as to what you should be growing. But think, what does your family like to eat? What are those cold weather, hardy crops? Look at that list on your workbook. And what, and here it's even like, how much does it cost, right? For you to buy it, that I need to grow it in the fall. So as you do that, I'm going to ask Alyssa, I'm going to put a timer for 2 minutes here. We have 15 minutes left. So I'm just going to do 2 minutes for you all to do that. And then we'll, I'm going to present a share screen. So Alyssa, if you are ready, I'm going to just share a screen, and I don't know if you can see my screen. Dave, could you tell me if my screen is seen, or Alyssa? And I'll change it too. And
I am taking a look at it now, and it's not coming up like it did last time.
Okay. Oh, okay. I know, because I didn't press the button. Dave, do you have the zip code for Arizona for like Sandy? I'm going to look at it. DIY chicken here. I'm going to use one of our clients as a an example because she's always wanted to know what she could grow, and it's so hard to figure that out when, here we go, 85234. Okay. When you're in a climate that's different from the rest of the US. Okay, share.
There we go. I'll put it right up.
Yay. Okay, I'm gonna change this. Is it gonna work, Dave? 524 85234. Is that right? Is that an actual zip code?
So you probably after you save, just refresh the page.
Okay.
So that
I'm gonna stop sharing for now because I have to look up her address again. 85234.
the address is for the planting windows.
Okay, all right. Let me do that again. Sorry about that, Alyssa. Share screen 85234. I do want to share information that was private, except for the zip code, just the zip code. And then I'll refresh this screen. So this is inside Sage so that I can finally give her planting windows. Ooh, that just went off. So 2 minutes is up. I'm going to add an area. The person from Arizona, I'll pick on you. What is your name and what do you want to grow if you are on the call? I hope I can see the chat come in. Dave, if you want to tell me what it is. And if not, I'm just going to use Sandy's name. Sandy's Garden. I wonder if she's still here. Okay, so in Sandy's Garden, it's bringing up data from other things, but we will plant some fall things and see when we can actually plant them. So when could we plant lettuce, for instance? It's super hot now, but we couldn't plant it now. HIJKLM, lettuce, fall. And let's say I want 10 lettuce ones. I want to create that. Our planting dates are, okay, so there you can see based on the weird, the different, I'm not weird, like it's different for you guys than most of, same thing with California, than most of the states. That's why I'm picking on you, because you're like the outliers. So then you would estimate your seed starting would be all the way in November, your transplant date would be all the way at the end of November, and your harvest date for lettuce would be in January. So that's the difference in that window. And then if I click back, and I'm going to change this to a different address again, to my address.
Just make sure you refresh.
Yeah, I'll refresh. Thank you, Davey. And I'm going to look at somebody in DC's garden. I already repopulated this. So Kristen, this is not your exact zip code. This is mine, but we're around the same area. I know she's going to watch. You can see, and these are the things. So she has 2 small raised beds, 8x4s. So this is I think these are the things that she wants to grow. And I could be wrong, Kristen, but based on that, I have created this little template for you. And here we can see that her planting dates are September for seed starting cilantro, September 14 for transplanting, harvest date 11/13, because it's fast growing enough. And she has negative 5.6 feet space left. So that means I've got to delete something so that she has enough space to grow. See that showing up again. So now she does. She still has 4 feet of space to go. So this is chock-a-block of things in a garden and in DC that you could grow. So this is Washington, DC. I know one registrant was from DC as well. So just an example of that. And I'll go back to my slides. How did everybody do? Okay. They are bad for the first time. Oh my gosh, I'm only seeing the chat now. Rachel, yes. Those garlic and bugs. I know you already took them out. Kim Smith, this is so snazzy. So yeah, Kim, I don't know if you're, where are you from? So a little later, we'll ask you if you guys want to know what you can plant and when, we can pull up your dates. We wanted to actually get a freebie for you guys going where you can do it yourself, but we're working on other things. So back to the slides that have to do with Sage and making it easy to use. So now we are on slide, where do we find the Sage app? So at the end on our website, we'll show you in a little bit, but Alyssa, could I please pull up my slides? I'm trying to, there we go, thank you. Yes, so Michelle, we have it on our website, permaculturegardens.org/sage, and you'll see the links all over on our website as well, permaculturegardens.org. So hopefully, anybody want to share what they figured out their planting list is for the fall? Anyone? Pop it in the chat. We want this to really be productive. We want this, we don't want you to just talk at you and we want you to get something out of this. At the end of this webinar, you would have had your planting list for the fall. Okay, and if you can't, if you don't have it all figured out, that's okay. Review this webinar. Just put like four of the things that you thought of in the chat. What else do you need to know? What else you may need to know? If you have any crops that you're unsure about seasonally, drop the crops and your zip code in the chat, and Dave can figure out what the dates
I'll
are.
use my analog brain, or I can type it.
She'll use your analog brain. Okay. So drop your crops or your zip code in the chat. If you're like, some people are like, what can I still grow? Tomato.
Audra, just tell me where you're coming from in the country, so I can
or zip code. Yeah, if you're not, or if you're in Canada and you don't have a zip code or an American zip code, Dave can also figure that out. There's like a custom climate. But thanks. Okay. Or what else you might need to, if you have any questions.
I can talk these things.
Go ahead, Davey.
Should I answer the questions? So I'm not sure where you're growing, Audra. Western Kansas. So that's like, it's temperate. It's still hot. I would start your Swiss chard and beets now. They can take a little bit of heat, especially the Swiss chard can take a little more heat than the beets, but you still want to keep them in the shade while they're growing. And then you'll be able to transplant them out in September. The bok choy is fast growing, so you can wait on starting that until September, and then you can plant it in I'd say like mid-September, and that would be the perfect time to the bok choy will only take about 40 to 50 days to harvest. Now I can get the exact dates, but that's just quick off the top of my head.
Rachel says, planning by first frost date is so helpful. Here's what I hope to plant for the fall: radish, peas, Swiss chard, lettuce, beets, carrots, and parsley. Wow. Yes, those are going to grow. And notice it's a no brassica garden.
Well, the radish is brassica, but
but it's like underground. So
luckily the radishes can kind of get eaten on the top.
On the top. That's what's happening to my radish right now. So that's wonderful. I'm in North California. I planted garlic last fall around November and had a fantastic harvest in June and July. Congratulations, Claude. I hope you enjoyed that. I love planting garlic, how you can just like set and forget it. And honestly, I've even found that, the earlier you did the right thing, like November. Some people will forget and put it in like in January rather, and they still get a harvest. So it's very forgiving as long as your soil is good.
So Sherry, it's a little tight to start tomatoes now. Now, if you're Western Arkansas, it's probably a little bit, you're close to Texas, so you will get heat into the fall. But I would just, to be on the safe side, I would grow what they call a short season variety of tomato or a cherry tomato, because certain beefsteak tomatoes will take upwards of like 95 to 100 days, and when you're just starting to get your harvest. And the thing with tomatoes is, you'll see like days to harvest. That's when you're starting to get ripening of your first wave of fruits. But to really get a good bumper crop of tomatoes, you want them producing for a long time. So I would recommend some of these shorter season tomatoes that are ripening in about 70 days. And what could help if you already have some tomatoes or you know somebody who's growing tomatoes, it's quite easy to take a sucker from a tomato plant and just root that sucker, and then it's faster than growing it from seeds. So
Mm-hmm.
that will give you like an extra 1 or 2 week a bump.
Yeah, good luck with that, Sherry. I'm glad you still want to grow the tomatoes. That's one of those things that you need to grow that's expensive, but so much cheaper when you have it your own, and so much more delicious.
A lot of people are mentioning garlic. That's like one of the hidden. Uh,
Hidden gems of
yeah, it's the your garlic that you just kind of throw in the ground in the fall. It's a biennial. It grows all winter long, and then you get these amazing bulbs in the spring. I just wanted to add a couple other things that people might not have thought about that you can also do. Um, we've found in the last 2 years that you can actually do this with potatoes. Is that you throw the old potatoes in that are kind of sprouting. You throw them in the ground now, even though it's like 90, 100 degrees. And then they'll start to germinate and sprout as long as they don't spoil in the ground. They'll start to grow now, probably like September. And then you can harvest them like November, December timeframe and get a fall crop of potatoes because they're actually a cool weather crop that prefers the cooler weather. A couple other things that fall in the allium family are leeks. So that's another, if you have always had trouble growing onions, then leeks are a little easier. They're a little lower maintenance to grow over the winter time.
scallions. Yeah, scallions, green onions, the perennial onions, the walking onions, if you've ever heard of those, are great ones too. What is your main? I have a question for you guys if there are no more questions coming in. What is the main takeaway or your like goal? I know what yours is, Rachel. For anybody here on the call after this, was this helpful? We want to know. Um, Tell us, what do we want? If we could hold you accountable in a few weeks' time, what do you want to have done from this workshop? Or what did you take away from it? I don't see the chat honestly, so I don't know whether anybody's answering or not. But if nobody's answering, does anybody? Yes. Lots of food for thought. Yes, indeed, Kim. I hope so. I want to make up for the poor spring garden now. Yeah, Sherry, way to go. Okay. Yes, I'm so happy to hear that. Yeah, you can. And that's why we really are growing year round. Because even if things do slow down, let's say in the winter or the summer for the hotter places, right? The winter for us, what are we doing then? We're planning, we're thinking of that better harvest. Yeah. Yay, Marsha. I look forward to extending my growing season. These are great. I hope that we were able to help. I've never grown bok choy, so learning it's a fast growing is good. Yes. Yes, for sure. There's lots of these, yeah, radish is fast growing. You saw that list, right? Good information that I had not really heard before. You can read things, but actually hearing it makes a difference. Thank you so much. Well, thank you for being here, Sandra. Yeah, we are here to do garden planning all year round with Mother Earth News because we're always planning for the next season and planning for the next season so that we can improve what we're already doing and make ourselves, grow that really grow the food that we're eating more and more. So we get better each time, we get better each season. We hope that you'll join us again for the next one a quarter from now. But I'll go to the next slide. If you want to, oh, here's some fall topics that I didn't cover today. designing your fall garden. So now you have the plant list. How are you going to plot that out, right, in your garden beds? How to improve soil fertility in the fall. This is something that you may want to look into more. Fall garden maintenance, how to build a permaculture food forest.
So
Some
we
of
didn't
these,
mention like a
Mhm.
part of fall garden maintenance is just talking about how you extend your season.
Yes,
So if
and we
you're
have a
in the
blog on
north
that.
and yeah,
Yes, and I have a blog on that on our website, extending. I don't have too many blogs on the website, so you'll find it if you just scroll around. Extending your fall garden, and I'll be posting this in our newsletter. So do get on our newsletter if you haven't yet, and we'll be sharing it there. This is how you can keep in touch with us. The number one way is to sign up for a newsletter here in permaculturegardens.org, or if you're interested in sage, you can see it on our website as well. We try to put like just one place where you can find everything. I will get better about posting on Instagram, but it is my sole social media thing, and hopefully I'll have more posts there. But you can always reach us at permaculturegardens@gmail.com. And we wish you the best. Grow abundantly, grow an abundant harvest this coming fall. Thank you.